Hi, everybody. So glad to have you here for this week's Talmud class, the penultimate of the series. Next week will be our final class together. And of course, just a wonderful thank you to the B'nai Yeshurun Shul congregation, as well as you as our community together. Just really, really grateful and glad to have you here. And of course, the study of Talmud, which is why we're here. We are going to do something a little different than what we've done before, which is we're going to read a story. The Talmud just tells a whole story, and it's really fascinating, and it has all sorts of interesting theological questions, metaphysical questions, all sorts of interesting things. And what's cool is this story immediately precedes a text that we learned about a month ago, which means we could have learned it a month ago. It was a totally different context, but we didn't. And that's sort of the beauty of these things sort of weaving together. I know I haven't given you a lot of information, and that's okay. The text we're going to learn today is from Masechet Shabbat, which, as you might imagine, is loosely about Shabbat. And the scenario, the sort of context of this story is the giving of Torah to Moshe on Mount Sinai. And the text that we learned about a month ago or whatever was about Moshe tying the crowns on the top of the letters. So one of the versions of that story immediately succeeds the section we're about to learn. But today, we're going to learn a different story, sort of the dilemma that shows up. And one of the things that happens sort of immediately before this, which we're not going to read today, I'll share my screen so you can at least see it. Can everybody see this okay? Yes, thumbs up?
Yeah.
Great. Is this story here in which we learn from the Gemara that every time when God spoke at Mount Sinai, the souls of the Jewish people left their bodies. And then there's this interesting story about how does it happen? What did the souls come back? Whatever. And then the story ends. We're not going to read it, so don't get too lost in it. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, with each and every utterance on Mount Sinai that emerged from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be God, the Jewish people retreated in fear 12 miles from the mountain. And that the ministering angels beckoned them, walked them back to the mountain to tell, so that the Torah could be given. Now, two things. One is when the Talmud says utterance, they're referring generally to the 10 commandments. We're talking about the 10 utterances, right? The 10 commandments. What I want you to, the reason why we're talking about this at all, at least by way of introduction, is that there is this interesting dynamic that the Talmud is telling us between people, God, and the angels. That there is some sort of connection, and Torah, and some connection and relationship between these things. In this case, the people are afraid, and the angels come and help the people come back to the mountain. Interesting all by itself. But that's not the story we're going to learn. We are going to learn stories about angels and Torah and God and the people. And we're going to start with this scenario in which Moses climbs the mountain and starts to receive Torah. Can I get a volunteer to read the first paragraph of our story here?
I'll read.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said.
And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, when Moses ascended on high to receive the Torah, the ministering angels said before the Holy One, blessed be he, master of the universe. What is one born of a woman doing here among us? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, he came to receive the Torah.
All right, pause.
Yeah.
Pause. Okay, let's just sort of set the tone here, right? Moses comes up on Mount Sinai to receive Torah. The angels are there with God somehow. Again, we don't really know exactly how this works, and here we have some sort of it. And what is their primary problem here? Why is a mortal here to receive Torah? Like, how can we allow a mortal to be on the same level as us as angels? Like, I think they're talking almost geographically, right? That on high, that this sort of Mount Olympus sort of imagery, right? Where the climbing Mount Sinai, which ostensibly is this low, humble mountain, has somehow reached God, this divine, holy place level. And the angels are saying, what is a mortal doing here? And God answers, to receive Torah. All right, Jackie, keep going.
The angels said before him, the Torah is a hidden treasure that was concealed by you 974 generations before the creation of the world. And you seek to give it flesh and blood. As it is stated, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations in Psalms 105.8. Since the Torah, the word of God, was given to the 26th generation after Adam, the first man, the remaining 974 generations must have preceded the creation of the world.
Okay, I'm going to pause you again, Jackie. You're doing great. Mm-hmm. So first of all, we have this challenge. Why a mortal person comes to receive Torah? The angels say, Torah is a hidden treasure, right? And the language here is chamuda genuza, this precious thing that has been hidden away, right? Chamuda, you'll often say like chamud is like cute or special or something like that, some treasure. People often say that to children, right? Like, oh, you're so precious. And then genuza comes from the same root as geniza, where we bury and save, protected and save things with God's name on it, where we have this hidden treasure that was concealed by you 974 generations before the creation of the world. That is an interesting thing. How do they get there? Rabbi Steinsaltz explains, there is a verse in Psalms that say 1,000 generations, right? God commanded 1,000 generations. The problem is that when Moshe exists, there is not 1,000 generations. If you do the math in the Torah, between Adam Arishon, the first person, and Moshe, we have about 26. And so the question is, what happened to the rest of the 1,000? And here, according to Rabbi Steinsaltz, those preceded the creation of the world. This begs a number of questions of like, how does this work? Where were they? Did they live? It's not clear at all. And again, it's not the focus of this story, but it does start to tell us, at least for the Gemara, how they're imagining that there are things that we have not experienced, that human beings have not experienced, that are beyond this creation, this universe, this bubble of space-time that we live in. And then, of course, the challenge, like, there's this hidden treasure. It has all sorts of weird dynamics with creation of the world, and you want to give it to a mortal flesh and blood person? That's outrageous. Yeah, Bob.
Which part of the Torah, what's the definition of Torah here?
It's a really important question. So the definition of Torah is like a kaleidoscope, right? Which is to say, it means a lot of things all at the same time and none of them specifically. Which is to say, when we use the word Torah in the Gemara like this, they're talking about literally the thing that was received on Mount Sinai, the 5 books of Moses. Again, whether or not you personally believe that is like totally your own prerogative. I'm not suggesting a particular theology here, but the Gemara means that 5 books of Moses. It also means that when they say Torah, they're talking about this sort of metaphysical blueprint of the universe, right? That the universe itself functions by way of, through the sanctity of Torah. So it means simultaneously this sort of object, this discrete list of mitzvot and stories and what have you. And it also means sort of every conception of Torah that could be possibly imagined, right? So it sort of kaleidoscopes between the two at the same time, which of course is not a super helpful answer, Bob. I know.
And the next line, what is man, that's often quoted at funerals as part of the liturgy for funerals.
I didn't know. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's super interesting. I didn't know that.
Because parts of the Torah are after, like the walking through the desert, all of that, that's afterward.
Yeah, so according to traditional understandings, the Torah is given, which includes the stories of Moshe dying and Moshe telling the story after they've received Torah. So one of the reasons why Rashi says Ein mukdam umeuchar b'Torah there is no before or after in Torah, which is that Torah itself is not documenting something in chronological order, that it is sort of this description of Torah, the document itself is not describing things happening in chronological order, meaning to say Moshe might have received Torah and then it keeps describing things that happened, but he still received it. It sort of bends time and space. If any of you are science fiction fans, Doctor Who, one of the doctors in Doctor Who say, how does time work? Time is a wibbly wobbly ball of things. And so it's not necessarily obvious on how that works. So it does mean a little bit of both, which is confusing. And I think there's somewhere else in the Gemara that says that only the last few lines of the Torah are written by Joshua, but everything else is written by Moshe or documented by Moshe. So again, not a super clear answer, but I think the thing you should hold in your mind in this story is the two pieces. One, simultaneously the document itself, as well as sort of the broader blueprint of the universe kind of thinking. Those are the two things you should hold in your mind. Nelson and then Ron.
We've just said there's 974 generations before the creation of the world, and in all their understandings of time, that's atemporal. It couldn't be consistent with what way they understand time, because time requires creation and change. It's the first thing that's really created, and which means if time is compressed in some sense or structural inside of Torah, of course, because it also existed before.
Yeah, I think the answer is I don't know. Like, I don't really understand how the rabbis conceptualize this idea of 974 generations before the creation of the world. It is a super fascinating thing. There's a note here. Let's take a look at it together and see if it will add anything. Here it says this: the idea has been presented elsewhere as the Torah preceded creation of the world by 2,000 years. Some claim that the two calculations are equal. The calculation is based on the following. There are 10 generations from Adam to Noach. There are 10 generations from Noach to Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, Kehat, and Amram are 6 additional generations. The last 26 of the 1,000 generations that began with creation. Meaning to say that under this note, we would say between like creation and Adam, maybe that 6th day of creation thing was much longer than it appeared, like in terms of the measurement of time, as opposed to a membership of people. But again, like, it doesn't really answer much of the question you pointed out, which is to say, it's not clear how time functions in this way. And I don't think the rabbis really know either. This might be a bit of hyperbole, but it helps us sort of get into the mental place of the grandeur, I think, that the Talmud is trying to describe here. Ron.
Here I go again. Number one, since Torah has no before and after, the 1,000 generations also may not have before and after. So some of them might not have happened yet. That's number one. Number two is, what was number two?
Wait a second. Before you figure out what number two is, I think that is a reasonable read. That is not how the Talmud is understanding it, because it says 974 generations before the creation of the world. Now, their proof text, according to Rabbi Steinsaltz, is the word which God commanded to 1,000 generations. That could very reasonably be understood as 1,000 generations from Adam or from Moshe or from Abraham or whatever, which we are still living through. It certainly hasn't been that long. It hasn't been 1,000 generations by any means. So I think that read is reasonable with the proof text, but I don't think that's certainly not what the rabbis mean in this context, because they use the framing of before the creation of the world. But in either case, what the angels are telling us in this story is, we've got this almost infinitely precious thing, and you're going to give it to humans? What a ridiculous idea. And we're going to see how that gets resolved. Nelson, last word.
Wait, I wasn't done. I've got my
sorry.
number two.
Yeah.
My number two, and I had a number three, but I haven't figured that one out yet. My number two was, if from Adam to Moshe was 26 generations. How much time was that? Because if the 974 generations were before Adam, then let's figure out what that length of time it was, and we could figure out when the earth was really created, or when time. I know what the other thing was did Torah come before time, or did time come before Torah?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last one first, which is the rabbis would say that Torah preceded time, for sure. As for the other thing, here becomes the challenge, which is when you want to read the Torah or the numbers in Torah literally, I think is a trap. Like, certainly you can do it. You could probably do the math of asking how long those things were. What is 974 generations? That, again, it says before the creation of the world, which means that's the time before creation happened. So it doesn't even really answer the question of how long ago was creation. It would be how long ago was, what happened before creation, which again is sort of meaningless on some level in terms of it's like hard to wrap your brain around not creation.
But when you go with that, then you could also say that when the Torah talks about 70 prominent people and 40 years and 40 days, that those are all just numbers. They don't mean anything.
Exactly. I do think that is generally how we should understand it. These numbers, I think, are they're not just estimations. They dot with the rabbis and the Torah often do is use numbers to express emotion, which is 40 years is a long time. 974 generations is like an imperceptibly long time. That's the lesson. That's the takeaway. It's not that we should understand 365 and a quarter, right, times 40 is how we should concept. It's not that. It's that these are long periods of time. When the Torah tells us 600,000 men of military age at the foot of the temple, it's just a lot of people. That's the point. It's just a tremendous, large number of people. And again, that's the lesson we're learning here as well. Nelson, and then Jackie, you're gonna keep reading.
I just want to, you're assuming that the world has been totally created. And I want to say to Ron, the fact that you couldn't remember 1, 2, and 3 just shows that the sequences aren't right. You're somewhere in this sequence, but not necessarily from the beginning or from the end. You're just proving the point.
What was the first thing you said, Nelson? I forgot it already.
I said, you, Rabbi, are assuming that the world's been completely created.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
I think that's a fair challenge. I think that's a fair point. The only thing I will add is, again, the language in the text itself is kodem shenivra olam, before the world was created. Whether or not what that actually means, right? I happen to believe in, as you highlighted, right, the ongoing creation of the universe. I think makes a lot more sense, me personally. But again, the Gemara is documenting it. But I think, again, our takeaway is this is a super long time. This is a deeply precious thing. How could we possibly give it to human beings? That's outrageous. All right, Jackie, keep going. What is a person?
What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you think of him? Rather, God our Lord, how glorious is your name in all the earth, that your majesty is placed above the heavens. The rightful place of God's majesty, the Torah, is in the heavens.
Great. So here's the end of the angel statement, right? Which is, you would give this to flesh and blood? That's ridiculous. Human beings are barely considerable. And not only that, but your name, your Torah, the majesty of God's creation is truly yours and should live in heaven. That's the statement the angels are making. Let's find out what God says in response. Jackie, do you mind keep reading?
No problem. Please. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, provide them with an answer as to why the Torah should be given to the people.
Pause. Jackie, what an amazing response from God, right? Moses comes on the mountain. God, angels are like, what is he doing here? God says, Moses, what are you doing here? God knows, but puts the words in, makes the words come out of Moshe's mouth. Keep going, Jackie.
Moses said before him, Master of the universe, I am afraid lest they burn me with the breath of their mouths. God said to him, grasp my throne of glory for strength and protection, and provide them with an answer. And from where is this derived? As it is stated, he causes him to grasp the front of the throne and spreads his cloud over it.
All right, pause. Oh, no, keep reading. One more sentence. I'm sorry.
And Rabbi Nachum said, this verse teaches that God spread the radiance of his presence and his cloud over Moses.
All right, great. Okay. God says to Moses, tell the angels why you're here, like why you deserve Torah, which is a fascinating question all by itself. Moses responds out of fear. I am afraid to give them an answer lest they harm me. Again, super interesting relationship about with humans and angels and their power. God says to Moshe, don't worry, I will protect you. Touch my throne of glory. And we have this verse from Job that sort of like gives us some weight to it. And what do we know? Like, what's the takeaway? Rabbi Nachum gives us a visual. God spread God's presence before over Moses. Nelson, I want to finish the paragraph and then I'm going to come back to you. Okay, Jackie, keep reading.
Okay, Master of the universe, the Torah that you are giving me, what is written in it? God said to him, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt from the house of bondage. Moses said to the angels, did you descend to Egypt? Were you enslaved to Pharaoh? Why should the Torah be yours?
All right, Jackie, I'm going to pause you there. Okay, so we're getting, again, this is a story. God says, tell the angels, I will protect you. What does Moshe say? What does Torah tell us? Again, it quotes the first commandment. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt from the house of bondage. So Moshe turns to the angels and say, where were you? Were you in Egypt? Did you experience, were you freed from bondage by God from Pharaoh? Why do you deserve Torah? This to me is just a fascinating, outrageous response to the angels. Angels are saying, you're barely considerable. You're this tiny speck of creation. And Moses responds saying, yeah, but we experienced it. We went through it. It's directed to us. Now, Jackie, I'm going to have you read again in a minute because the story is going to continue. But before I do that, Nelson, go for it.
Well, I just think this is an answer to racism. You're not any better because you get the Torah. And it's a very typical kind of nice Jewish boy fear. I'm going to get beat up. And God says, I'll protect you. It's don't be afraid of being beaten up. Say what's true. Be yourself.
I mean, there are certainly places where the rabbis are pretty racist. Let's call a spade. But I do think here we are learning human beings have inherent value. Don't be afraid. And I love the point you made, right? Say truth, even if it might be scary. I think there's something to that. Yeah, Nelson.
But also we have to learn what it's like to be the victim of racism. And that's what we're being victimized here. The angels say, we're better than you. We should have it all.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. I want to be really careful where Moshe is representing humanity and angels are not. And when we use racism today, we're not talking about that. And so I understand the point you're making, and I think there's validity there. I'm not arguing against it, but I do think there's more nuance in terms of the way we use language to describe this. But I understand the point you're making, which is, right, like human beings have value. We have to understand, especially with the Pharaoh part, we have a lived experience that has value by itself, right? That we struggled, we experienced oppression, and we're now on the other sides of it. So I think point well made. All right, Jackie, keep going.
Why should the Torah be yours? Again, Moses asked, what else is written in it? God said to him, You shall have no other gods before me. Moses said to the angels, do you dwell among the nations who worship idols that you require this special warning? Again, Moses asked, what else is written in it? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, remember the Shabbat day to sanctify it. Moses asked the angels, do you perform labor that you require rest from it? Again, Moses asked, what else is written in it? Do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, meaning that it is prohibited to swear falsely. Moses asked the angels, do you conduct business with one another that may lead you to swear falsely?
All right, Jackie, I'm going to pause you there. I think people are starting to get the rhythm here. What is Moshe doing? Moshe is going line by line in the 10 Commandments and saying, this doesn't apply to you. Angels, this does not apply to you. You don't, right? You don't deal with idolatry. You don't deal with labor and rest. You don't deal with swearing or doing, swearing oaths, right? You don't have parents in which you have to honor. And then I'm going to skip ahead, Jackie, for a sec, right? Right? You don't murder each other. You don't commit adultery. You don't steal. You don't have jealousy. There's no evil inclination amongst you angels, right? This can't apply to you. Torah doesn't make sense if applied to angels. It has to refer to people. And sort of in our more particularist case, right, as distinct from universalism, we're saying, yeah, there's like a human element of it, but here also we're saying the Jewish people, this is ours. And here at the end, immediately, I'm down here now, immediately they agreed to the Holy One, blessed be God, that God made the right decision to give Torah to the people, right? Moshe made a good argument. And at the end of the day, they understood why God was doing what God was doing. And as it was stated, God, how glorious is your name on all the earth. While your majesty is placed above the heavens, is not written because the angels agreed with God that it's appropriate to give the Torah to the people of earth. Meaning to say, there is something about us having it, human beings on earth, in our mortality, that matters. That like there's a relationship between our mortality and Torah. Before we read ahead, any other thoughts? Okay, we can keep going. This story continues to start to help us understand this relation, this moment in which Torah is transmitted. And here we get the next piece. So that was the first part, right? Which is, do human beings deserve Torah? And the answer is yes. Then we get the following. Can I get another volunteer to read immediately each and every one?
Immediately, each and every one of the angels became an admirer of Moses and passed something to him, as it is stated, you ascended on high, you took a captive, you took gifts on account of man, and even among the rebellious, also that the Lord God might dwell there. The meaning of the verse is, in reward for the fact that they called you man, you are not an angel, and the Torah is applicable to you. You took gifts from the angels, and even the angel of death gave him something, as Moses told Aaron how to stop the plague, as it is stated, and he placed the incense and he atoned for the people. And the verse says, and he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. If it were not the angel of death, if it were not that the angel of death told him this remedy, would he have known it?
All right. First off, we get this super interesting emotional response. Not only are the angels cowed by the argumentation by Moshe, they turn around and say, you know what? That is a guy worth admiring. They did a total 180, right? They started in a place when saying human beings are barely considerable. They're specks of creation. barely noticeable to, you know what, Moshe, you did something pretty awesome. you were able, right, to convince us and bring Torah to earth. What a powerful thing that is, right? And not only that, right, the Talmud is telling us, even the angel of death was convinced to give Moshe some sort of gift, some sort of thing. And the answer is, and the quote, the proof text, it comes from this week's parsha in Korach, right? Which is this this plague that exists. Again, we can sort of dig into that. That's not really the point of the story, but that we use this week's parsha as an example in which Moshe has something that ostensibly he would not have otherwise. That's why the Gemara says, if it were not for the fact that the angel of death told him the remedy, would Moshe have known it at all? Which I think is super fascinating, right? That resolves the problem between, and Moshe stood between the dead and the living. Because Moshe has this gift, and this gift comes as a result of basically Moshe defending the honor of human beings against the angels and the giving of Torah. Any thoughts on this? What do people think? What are we learning about Moses in this?
He's capable of learning from other sources,
Say more about that.
and he's flexible.
Right, he's not just a follower, right?
No, he can take the information that he's given, these gifts that he's been given, and he knows what to do with them.
Certainly sometimes, right? Other times he,
Which gives him power over the angels.
For sure, for knowledge is power. Certainly we have that here. And Moshe, right, we're learning he has this gift from the angel of death that has a perfect use. Again, we know later on he hits the rock instead of speaking to it, and he
gets into trouble.
Faith. So he's not a perfect person by any means, but here he certainly has something that's really quite powerful in terms of how he can use what he has to help the people, which I think is pretty powerful. That's a good thing to bring up, Jackie. The story continues. I think is so fascinating. We haven't read a lot of stories about the Satan, this sort of oppositional figure that exists in rabbinic writing. But here we have one, right? So Satan famously shows up in the book of Job. We have a lot of quotes from Job in this section, which makes sense. Where God and Satan are debating about whether or not Job, who is this righteous person, will denounce God for the unfair punishment he receives for things he didn't do. And ultimately we learn that Job does not do that. He remains faithful to God. That's the story arc, and Satan loses. So again, we're going to start to see Satan here in this story. Yeah, Nelson.
If Moses just stood between the people, would that have been the remedy, or did he have to know it was the remedy for his standing in place to work?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to look at it. If we look at it from the Torah side, it probably has nothing to do with this, right? Like if we're looking just pshat at what the Torah text says, it probably has nothing to do with this whole story. The rabbis see this problem, air quotes here, of God that Moses stood between the dead and the living, and the rabbis are going to say to themselves, what does that mean? Oh, we can plug it into this story that Moses received this gift, and this is when he used it. So again, if we're looking at it from the rabbinic side, Moshe is this like superhero-like character on some level, who at the same time is deeply humble and knows exactly what to do, as Jackie was saying. If we look at it from the Torah side of things, sort of more critical, analytical way, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like this doesn't come from anything. So we have to sort of hold which worldview we're looking at, or more honestly, both.
No, I don't think you've understood my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If he stood between the living and the dead and didn't know it would work, would it have worked? Or did it only work because he was told it would work?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer. I mean, I think the rabbis would say there could be a lot of answers, right? So if we were to interpret this text, right, we got layers here. We've got Torah layers, we've got Gemara layers. If we were to add one more layer of interpretation, right? If we were the commentators to the Talmud, we might write a commentary together asking and answering that question. I don't know the answer, certainly, about whether or not Moshe knew. That might be an interesting opportunity for a new midrash. Nelson, maybe you need to write.
I've got one too here. It says Moses knew because he already read it in the Torah.
I love it. I love it. So it sounds like, Ron, you and Nelson need to write a midrash to this story, answering this question.
Ron, can we throw Doctor Who in there too?
Yes, now we're talking. Okay, let's keep going. Let's read this story about the Satan. Can I get another volunteer to read this? And by the way, I believe all of these are attributed to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So again, we're starting to learn a little bit, and there's some more before this that I didn't include. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. We are learning Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's story, right? Attributing it to him. And so it's important for us to remember here. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, can I get a volunteer to read? Okay, I'll read it. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, when Moses descended from standing before the Holy One, blessed be God, right? So we're getting an order of operations here, right? Moses went up the mountain, Moses was on the mountain, Moses started to come down the mountain. When Moshe was descending from before standing with God, with Torah, Satan came and said before God, Master of the universe, where is Torah? All right, all of a sudden, Satan wants to know where Torah is. Interesting. God said to the Satan, I have given it to the earth. The Satan went to earth and said to it, where is the Torah? And the earth said to the Satan, I do not know, as only, now we get a proof text, God understands its way and God knows its place. First of all, let's pause here for a second. I love the imagery that the Talmud is using, that the earth itself quotes Tanakh. That the earth is learned enough to quote Tanakh. Again, remember, we're in the rabbinic imagination here. We're deep in the rabbinic imagination. And again, I love it. God says, I gave it to earth, and earth says, only God knows. Just what a response. God then, the Satan goes to the sea. Where's the Torah? And the sea said to the Satan, it is not with me. And then Satan went to the depths. Let me be really clear. Depths, the word we're talking about is the Tahom, this is the depths. These are like the foundational places of the universe, right? This is where the waters are coming from during the flood of Noah, right? These are the depths with a capital D, even though it's a lowercase d here. Satan went to the depths and said, where is the Torah? And the depths said to the Satan, it is not within me. And from where is it derived that the sea and the depths answered the Satan this way? As it is stated, the depths said, it is not within me, and the sea said, it is not within me, which is a quote from Job. Destruction and death said, we heard a rumor of it with our ears. Again, quotes from Job. The Satan returned and said before the Holy One, blessed be God, Master of the universe, I searched for Torah throughout all of the earth and did not find it. God says to the Satan, go to Moshe, son of Amram. The Satan went to Moses and said to him, the Torah that the Holy One, blessed be God, gave you, where is it? Moshe evaded the question and said to him, and what am I, that the Holy One, blessed be God, would have given me Torah, such as to say I'm unworthy. Again, I love this. This is where I think the Talmud is, that we often look at Talmud as these sort of law books and we get into the details, but here we're just getting pure story here. And I love the juxtaposition, right? That Moshe went on Mount Sinai to get Torah and had to intellectually battle the angels to say, not only are they worthy, but deserving of Torah. And here, what does Moshe do? Who am I? We should be receiving Torah? It's like exactly the opposite. It's just beautiful. Yeah, Bob.
Is this the first case of Jewish people answering a question with a question?
Probably not the first, but it is a great example of it. Yes, I love it. I love it, Bob. The Holy and Blessed be God said to Moses, Moses, are you a fabricator? Which is to say, God is listening to this conversation between Moshe and the Satan. Moshe asks this question, and God says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Are you lying? Are you being a liar? Moshe said before God, Master of the universe, you have a hidden treasure in which you delight every day, as it is stated, and I was God's delight every day, playing before God at every moment, from the book of Proverbs. Should I take credit for myself to say that you gave it to me? The Holy One and Blessed be God said to Moses, since you belittled yourself, the Torah shall be called by your name. As it is stated, remember the Torah of Moshe, of Moses, my servant, whom I commanded at Horeb, which is the name for Sinai, laws and statutes for all of Israel. So what's happening here? God says to Moses, why are you saying to Satan, right, basically saying, why should I get Torah when he had just done it? Moses says to God, saying, yes, and you have given me something so tremendous, I shouldn't take credit. You didn't give it to me. Like you gave it to me, but I didn't take it the same way as you gave it. They're not the same. I shouldn't take credit. And the Holy One, blessed be God, recognizes, again, in the telling of the Talmud, recognizes Moses's humility, and in reward, the Torah is named, right? We say the 5 books of Moses, the Torah of Moses. It's not just the Torah, it's the Torah of Moses. The story that we read ends here, what we're going to read today, because here we get the section that we read many weeks ago about tying crowns on the letters, and that whole question in which Moses says, right, like, oh, or God says to Moses, oh, people don't say hi in your neighborhood, right? We're not going to talk about that today. But here we get at the end of our story, basically the Satan disappears at the end of this story. We don't really know why Satan is looking for Torah. But we do know that Moses' response, at least in the eyes of the Talmud, is, yes, we receive Torah. It's this tremendous gift that we are not worthy for, albeit deserving, potentially, right? Again, depending on how you want to describe those words. And Satan sort of disappears from this story. He sort of becomes very flat and sort of disappears. And so I guess the question I have for you is, one, what do you think of this story? And second, what do you think, as the rabbis are telling us about our relationship to God and Torah, not only in a descriptive sense, but in a prescriptive sense? What should our relationship be based on this story? I'm going to stop sharing the screen. What do people think? There are no right answers here, right? Or no wrong answers here. No right or wrong answers here. This is an interesting story. What do people think? Let me ask it this way. Is there anything unexpected in this story? Yeah, Nelson.
I don't think it's unexpected, but it might be from another perspective. We talk with God. We argue. We disagree. We dialogue. It's not a one-way communication.
Yeah.
We challenge God.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's sort of mutual in some sense, right? God says to Moses, are you a fabricator? Right? Are you lying? Are you being a liar? Right? Like that's something you say, you know, you might say in anger, but is really saying amongst people who know each other. Right? Yeah. Other thoughts?
But the angels don't challenge God, except in giving the Torah to the Jewish people. That was the only time that the angels would challenge him.
There are other stories in which the angels sort of challenge a decision God has made, but they certainly don't take any action. So one example is even the creation of human beings all together comes up, or another place where the angels say, whoa, are you sure you want to do this? But certainly here, right, it's unexpected in the sense that we anticipate that angels would just follow through with what God is saying, right, without having that dialogue or giving an opportunity for God to justify God's self. And in this case, God hands that justification over to Moshe, who I think brilliantly responds to the challenge by saying, Torah doesn't make any sense if kept only in heaven, right? That it only makes sense in relationship to human beings, which I think, again, back to our original question of like, what is Torah as blueprint of the universe before creation, in creation, after creation, like super fascinating questions. Yeah,
It
Bob.
pertains to people.
Yeah, pertains to people.
One thing that we didn't mention was how can you have generation defined when there are no people?
Ooh, nice. Right, the measurement of generations make no sense without beings, without creatures.
Yeah, if you're talking about a human generation, because there's other generations that are extremely short.
We're not necessarily talking fruit flies here.
Yeah.
No.
So what is the point of all of this? Because obviously there was nobody there to write these notes. And I keep thinking of the image of the old silent movie where the rocket goes and hits the moon and the moon has a face and it talks. And well, obviously Satan didn't talk to the earth and the earth didn't answer. And so this is all images trying to give a reason for something. So what are we trying to get at here? What is the whole basis of the story, which is to give a reason for us to have received the Torah?
What do you think the answer is?
I don't know that we need a reason to, if God gives us the Torah, he gave us the Torah and it is our obligation to follow it. My thought processes don't go into trying to find a reason for this to have happened.
Yeah.
God wanted something more civilized for humans than the other animals, so he gave us the Torah to follow as a way to live.
Let me reframe your question, the one you asked and the one I handed back to you, which is, I think the question here is less, right, like why did we get Torah? But the question of asking, we've received Torah. The rabbis, right, they have lived a few thousand years, potentially a couple thousand years after Torah is given. Jewish people exist, right? There was a temple. This story is primarily in Hebrew. So we're talking about people who are in the land of Israel, right? This is not like they have Torah, right? The question I think that they're asking is sort of understanding why. It's less the question of how did we get Torah in a mechanical sense, which is but rather asking the question which is, we know that Torah is precious. How does that work? Right? It's
we have to know its value.
Right. I think the rabbis are already assuming that value, right? They're already starting, right? Chamuda ganuza, this hidden treasure, right? These are the rabbis talking to themselves about how precious they think Torah is. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi in particular, right? He's the one who's telling us this story about this unique relationship between heavenly beings, God, and people. We're not alone in the universe in one way or another. We don't know exactly how the universe functions, and yet we've been given this gift. What do we do? How did we get it? Were we always supposed to get it? There's another section of Talmud, it's not told here, in which the Torah is offered to other people first, before it comes to the Jewish people. So if we read those two stories together, right, we have an interesting conversation of not only did the Jewish people accept Torah, but they also did it in a way where they justified their existence, if we take this story, right? Which is to say, not only did we agree to Torah after everybody else, but now we're going to defend that position. It's not just by default. There's something active about this relationship. And then again, I think the really fascinating question is just what the angels and Satan do, like who they are in the pecking order of creation. Ostensibly, they are greater than us mere mortals, and yet both are cowed and put in their place by mere mortals. I find that fascinating. Yeah, Nelson.
Last week's Parsha, Moses marries this woman that Miriam and Aaron are upset about, and he's willing to engage in the most protective human relations to someone who's a minority, an outcast. And we're sort of in relationship here, we're kind of like a minority or an outcast from these powerful beings in the universe. We need to see that we shouldn't be treating others that way. We don't need God to turn us literally white to know that it's not the right thing to do, because it was the place that we didn't want to be. We fought our way out of it.
Right. I think one way we could use it, if I understand you correctly, that one way that we can use this text is recognizing sort of the ridiculousness of the angels' behavior towards humans, towards Moshe, and recognizing what I'm hearing you say is that we should not be the angels in someone else's story, right? We should not act in such a way that we ask other people to justify their own existence, right? And I think that's a really powerful lesson, right? Where we, even though this is a story between, angelic heavenly beings, the hosts, God and humans, when we're in other people's stories, we have to be careful that we are not the angels or Satan, right? That we can just let people be who they are without asking them to justify themselves. I think that's a very powerful lesson. I'll conclude our class with this, which is, over the course of this year, we have talked about we have sort of explored the relationship between Torah and Talmud. Right, every week we explore some sort of connection between the Talmud and the Torah portion. But greater than that, I think it's this fundamental question, which is, what is it? What is Torah? Right, Bob, you started us off by asking that question at the very beginning of the class. What are we talking about here? I think when we look at the literature we've seen over the course of this year, and again, I think this is manifested a bit by our text here, we can recognize that Torah and Talmud, again, broadly defined, these big categories, are things that are deeply human and divine and sacred because we've made them so, right? Like, they're not purely human. Again, I'm not suggesting a theology for you. You can sort of believe what you wish. But that there is something uniquely, that our relationship to it is uniquely human, right? Moses' argument is, it doesn't make any sense if it's not in relationship to humans. And as all of you had mentioned, generations, the story itself of Pharaoh, and that, all the different ways, this is something that's for us to deal with. And again, the question of how we deal with it is sort of its own set of questions, right? We didn't read that part too closely, but the story began, right, where the people were afraid at the utterances and kept retreating, and it was only the angels who kept bringing them back. We're learning something about coming back to Torah constantly. That Torah is something that is pervasive and part of the way we can interact with the world as human beings. For me, I find that powerfully motivating. Not to do a thing a particular way at a particular time. Certainly there's a piece to that, but just as inspiration to keep wrestling with it, to stay with it. And Moshe's response by saying at the beginning, we are definitely worthy, and I myself am not. To stay in that place of saying, yes, there is more to learn here. There's more I might know, but there's still more for me to learn. There's still more to challenge me. I think all of these lessons are embedded, woven in what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is telling us in this story. I'm going to leave you with that. And thank you for exploring this story with me. I think it's fascinating. I love the stories that show up in the Talmud. And I wish all of you a wonderful, a good Shabbos and a Shabbat Shalom, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, such as it may be. And for those of you who can, we'll see you next week for our final class.
Mhm.